Hello viewers and welcome to another episode of the Lord of the Rings The Card Game Progression Series. My name is Mitch.
And I'm Matthew.
And it's time today to successfully deliver Arwen Undomiel to the safety of Rivendell. Last time we took a look at the player cards from Road to Rivendell, and now it's time that we finish the associated scenario. So, Matthew, where are we in regard to our narrative?
Well, our heroes continue their journey northward to Rivendell, escorting Arwen to visit her father Elrond. But the road is long and orcs ambush the party along the way. With enemies hounding the heroes' steps, the weather drives the party ever closer to the looming mountains and the dangers they hold. So, what do we have in store as we try to bring Arwen home?
Well, like you said, we can expect ambushes, and we can expect an escort quest, but as always, let's begin today's video by taking a look at our player decks. This was a very interesting deck building challenge because I thought about incorporating Elladan and Elrohir somewhere in our mix of heroes, but they don't necessarily lend themselves particularly well to this quest just because they don't really work with allies that well, and there are just so many powerful dwarves at the moment. I beg everyone's pardon, but it looks like Matthew and I might be using our dwarves a little bit longer. Today I'm running Dane Ironfoot and Biffer as my two heroes, and again I'm doing a 3-sphere deck. Note that Matthew and I are both playing Spirit because our greatest threat to completing today's scenario is in the form of this incredibly nasty treachery card here, Sleeping Sentry. So when revealed, it's 1 damage to each exhausted character, and you exhaust already characters. That generally means combat does not go very well because it's undefended attacks, and it's got this horrific shadow effect that the defending player has to discard all exhausted characters he controls. So that's totally unacceptable to have that resolve under any circumstance whatsoever, so Matthew and I are both running Spirit to prevent that. Another thing he and I have to contend with is a lot of different attachment discard effects, primarily focused on directing those toward the first players. So I've got things like Erebor Hammersmith, and then I'm not running cards like Calabrian Stone just because it would be a damn shame to invest resources in those just to have them destroyed. Slowly but surely the encounter deck is boosting up the HP values of enemies, so our Thalin and Gondorian Spearmen combo is still useful, but it's less helpful than it has been traditionally. And Northern Tracker's still here, it's still great, but we're also seeing increased numbers of progress tokens required to explore locations. So again, that's a little bit less effective. Last thing I'll say before moving on to Matthew is that our threat values are rather low, just because in this scenario, we're kind of at risk of having enemies engage with us early and engaging with a player prior to our opportunity to do engagement, like optional engagement. So our threat is going to hopefully stay below 34. But I've said quite a lot. Matthew, what are you running today?
Well, kind of my tried and true, trusty Gimli and Thalin on the tactics side, and Dwalin on the spirit side. As you mentioned, we do have some nasty treacheries, so I also have a Test of Will, but Hasty Stroke in addition to help deal with some things the encounter deck might throw our way. Galadrim's Greeting, just like you, to help keep our threat under control. And I'm hoping that I can pull off a couple of times the old Thalin Gondorian Spearman trick, because that'll be quite handy in this quest with some of those 2 hit point enemies.
Yeah, here's hoping. Matthew and I are both packing Untroubled by Darkness as well. Steward of Gondor is hopefully going to be going on Dwalin because Matthew's deck is rather spirit-heavy. And then Biffer, if he picks up a Song of Travel from either Matthew or myself, whether or not that gets discarded, we can play additional copies if need be. I can return it to hand, blah, blah, blah. Biffer can kind of vacuum over some resources and help us to fund some of those expensive spirit effects. But with all that said and done, I suppose shall we draw our opening assortment of 6 cards?
Sure.
All right, so draw 6. My hand is actually pretty damn good. Resource acceleration, lots of willpower, chump blocker, and a bit of card draw. No Barivore today, so I'm certainly happy to see that. What about yourself?
It's certainly decent. I'm a bit nervous that I don't have any sort of shadow or encounter deck cancellation.
Yeah.
And I know that that's important. So I really like what's in my hand, but since neither of us have a test of will, I'm tempted to mulligan. So I think I'm going to.
Sure, I certainly wouldn't blame you. Lots of nice stuff, but that is pretty critical.
Okay, and my mulligan hand has 2.
Oh.
And so while the ally disbursement isn't quite as nice, I lost my Gondorian Spearmen. It's fairly decent, so I'll take it.
You even have shadow cancellation. My God.
Indeed, I do.
Well, fantastic. I was sweating today's scenario a little bit, but now I feel quite a bit better. I've even got sneak attack, should we happen to be joined by a wizarding companion of ours at some point.
All right.
Anyway, I'm happy with my hand. I could not be more happy with your hand. Exaggerating a little bit there. But let's take a look at Quest Phase 1A. Your party has braved the snows of the past, but now must travel north, along the misty mountains for league upon league, as you escort Arwen to her father's house. It sounds so mundane when they put it like that. Take your date home. Setup: put Arwen Undomiel into play under the control of the first player. Shuffle the encounter deck, reveal a card from the encounter deck per player, add them to the staging area. I suppose I will start off as the first player. I'm going to have a copy of Arwen with me. It's basically the same card as we saw in the last scenario. She can quest for 2, she can throw resources to Matthew or myself, so whichever one of us is most in need, she'll be there for us. And then last but not least, we have to reveal 1 card per player from the encounter deck and add those to the staging area, so let's see what we get today. Encounter card number 1 is going to be a copy of Plundered Armory.
Oh.
So this boosts up enemy attack while in the staging area, but it also gives us an opportunity to kind of cheat weapons and armor into play, although Matthew's deck was kind of built with the understanding that Citadel Plate could be discarded and is therefore a little too dangerous to include. Encounter card number 2 is going to be a copy of Goblin Spearmen. So no Thalon damage on this guy, but not too terrible.
Yeah.
2s all around. So things could certainly be worse. Let's flip our quest card, 20 progress points. This is a wild and perilous country, and it is dangerous to follow the roads. The mountains rise up on the right, impassively watching your slow trek among their foothills. And that's it. So, Matthew, shall we start?
Yeah, nice art there on that quest card, but let's do it.
Yeah, not bad at all. Looks like Bill the Pony and Samwise Gamgee there. So we each draw 1 card. We each get 1 resource. I came across an early copy of Song of Travel, so looks like things are going okay for me. I've got a strong defender in Dane, but I don't have enough for Steward of Gondor yet. I think what I will do is I'll spend 1 resource to do an Erebor Record Keeper for a couple willpower, and apart from that, I'm not going to play any attachments like Song of Travel, because then I'm unnecessarily risking them being discarded. But what about you, Matthew?
I will play a Lowly Vassal.
Okay. I do...
Yeah?
I was just going to say, I do have a Snowborn Scout for this location, but I'm going to hold off on that. But
okay.
Great.
And that's going to be it for me.
Cool. Okay, so here's the deal. For committing characters to the quest, normally I do a bunch of sample encounter card draws. I run through the encounter card deck twice and take an average. The average threat reveal is like 3.5. It goes as high as 7. We've got Arwen. We're currently against 5. Average value is something like 3.5. So we're up against 5. We can anticipate like 8.5. We're in no real need to rush through this scenario. I've got Frodo if I absolutely have to do an undefended attack. But I can certainly do... I suppose I can do like 7 my side, no problem at all, and I can bump that up to 9 if you want. But I suppose we should always think that this encounter deck is probably at least half enemies, and there's already one enemy in play that'll engage with one of us.
Yeah, I think I'm just going to send Thalon.
Okay. Most enemies, or most shadow cards, are return the enemy to the staging area, so that's certainly not too bad. If you do Thalon, that brings us to 9. I could do Frodo, and let's see. Out of all the enemies in the encounter deck, so currently I'm the first player, I'm at risk of an effect like Ambush, and I'll just pull up an encounter card to give an example here. So these Orc Raiders have the Ambush keyword. As soon as they enter play, each player makes an engagement check against it. So they would engage with me, I'd be forced to discard attachments, but they only attack for like 3. So maybe I'll play it a little easy and not send out cards. Of course, if enemies ambush, they don't remain in the staging area. So maybe Matthew and I can call it good with 9. And I went with Frodo instead of Eowyn. But let's just give it a shot. So we're sending a total of 9 encounter card number...
Before we get ahead of ourselves, don't forget Arwen's resource.
Oh, yes, of course. So any hero doesn't necessarily have to be questing. I could certainly use it on Dane.
Okay.
Or you've got something for cancellation. Would you want another spirit resource just in case?
My hand is clogged with spirit, so it wouldn't be a bad idea.
Yeah.
But
why don't you take it? I think
okay.
I'll be fine once I get Steward in play.
Okay.
Great, and thank you for reminding me about that. Certainly one of the best parts of that ally. And of course, it's worth mentioning that there's, like that discard all allies or all exhausted characters that would destroy Arwen, and then we would lose this scenario. And there's also a lot of damage to ally type effects as well. So it's good that I've got this record keeper out. Anyways, encounter card number 1 is going to be, hey, wouldn't you know it, so a copy of Orc Raiders. After this enemy enters play, each player, starting with the first player working around the table, has to make an engagement check against it. 21 is equal to or lower than my threat of 25, so this is going to engage with me immediately. After it engages a player, I have to discard 2 attachments if able. Luckily, I did not waste Steward of Gondor, I did not waste Song of Travel, and I've now got this not too terribly nasty enemy engaged with me, which takes a point of damage from Thalon. Encounter card number 2 is going to be another one of these plundered armories. So that's a lot of threat in the staging area, but a Northern Tracker would make short work of these. So we are going to be up against 8 threat. We've sent a total of 9, which means we're going to make 1 quest progress.
Okay.
And I suppose that's pretty much that. Frodo does have a point of attack, and your vassal is ranged. Cool. Okay, so for travel, should we travel to one of these plundered armories?
Yeah, otherwise the enemies are +2 attack, and that's pretty nasty.
Yeah, and these aren't too terribly difficult to deal with, so we may as well travel to that. Let's bear in mind that, let's see, this enemy is going to be attacking for 4, courtesy of this plundered armory. Travel is done, engagement is done. The Goblin Spearmen will engage with me unless you'd like to take it on.
Certainly.
Okay, so that'll head down to you. Again, it's a damn shame that that doesn't have a point of damage from, what's his name? From Thalon, because then that would set Dwalin up nicely for a kill. But for combat, I'm first player, so my enemy gets a shadow card, your enemy gets a shadow card. For resolving this attack, let's think for a moment. So which of these 2 enemies are you thinking about destroying on your turn? Like, what are you thinking about doing?
I was just going to defend the Spearmen with Gimli, and then hoping he gets a point or two of damage, maybe, and then attacking back with Dwalin, who can only do 1 point of damage, but I was just going to let him sit there.
Sure. So for me, I can either defend with Frodo, and then I guess I would have to take a little bit of a threat gain, or I could defend with Dane, and if I defend with Dane, then Dwalin won't deal any damage to your enemy unless you also throw your vassal out there.
Yeah, it's probably more important that we get rid of the Orc Raiders just because they swing harder.
Yeah, they certainly do.
And we want to keep our threats relatively low, so I'm okay having my enemy hang around a bit. We can take care of yours.
Sure. I suppose let's see. I don't really want to make a habit of doing undefended attacks. I could potentially take my Orc Raider attack undefended, put 4 damage onto Dane, and then Dane and Frodo could together kill my enemy, and then you could also kill yours. Let me glance at the encounter deck and just see how much direct damage there is. So 1 damage to a character, deal 1 damage to each ally, deal 1 damage to each exhausted character. Let's see, deal damage to an ally. You know, I think if we want to be a little bit, have a little bit of fun, I could take this attack of 4 undefended, and you do have a shadow card, and then we could totally clear the board of enemies. But that might be an unnecessary risk. I suppose it just all comes down to, do we want both enemies dead and Dane with 4 damage, or do we just want to hang on to one of these enemies? Maybe I'm just being too risky. But
perhaps. I mean, your deck notes do say to play conservatively, but
the deck notes I hastily wrote last night at 4 a.m.
I mean, my enemy is pretty wimpy, so I'm not concerned about him surviving another turn. But
okay.
It is you get to go first, so I'm who knows.
Really, the only thing to be aware of is that Matthew and I kind of want to minimize the number of shadow effects that we reveal. And I guess considering that there's so much return enemy to the staging area, there's not even any guarantee that we'll be able to kill these guys. So for my attack, I suppose I will defend with Dane. Shadow card is going to be attacking enemy gets +1. So it's going to be attacking for a total of 5, which means Dane is going to take 2 points of damage. And I suppose that's that. And then, how about your enemy?
I will defend with Gimli.
Okay, so Gimli does not get a shadow card. And here's our, not unique, but one-of-a-kind location that we'll see during Quest Phase 2, throwback to the Hobbit novel. Mm-hmm. So Gimli takes no damage. For attacking in return...
He takes 1.
Oh, yeah, sorry, I forgot about the Plundered Armory. So good call. My not sleeping is showing. Okay, so for returning fire, it's basically up to whatever you want to do with your vassal. Do you want to pick off my raiders or your Spearmen?
Let's do that.
All right, cool deal. Frodo will help out because why not? And the raiders are going to handily be destroyed. Thanks to a swing of 4, their shadow card is going to be discarded, and now they're gone. They can't be returned to the staging area and then re-engage and force more attachment discard. Mm-hmm. Okay, so unfortunately, at the end of the combat phase, your enemy is left alive. Mm-hmm. Thalon can, swing, but he can't deal any damage there. Although you do have a copy of Khazad.
Yeah, I do. I just wondered if it was best to use it now or save it.
I think I would just use it now. Okay. I didn't notice that. The beefiest enemy that we have to go up against is a wild bear with 8, HP plus defense. But if we keep our threats below 34, we can basically pretend it doesn't exist.
Okay, well... Dwalin then makes his war cry.
Beautiful.
And kills an orc, so I can lower my threat by 2.
Yeah, speaking of keeping our threat below 34, so well done. And it seems like I'm not missing every trigger this morning, which is good. Okay, so the Spearman is gone. I'm glad I didn't have Dane take some ridiculous undefended attack.
Yeah, that could have been bad.
And somehow I forgot about the +2 attack strength. I was so concerned about damage. So thank you for avoiding my poor life choices. And yes, I shall play conservatively from here out. Okay, so into the round, refresh. All right, first player is now you. Arwen changes sides. She turns over to you. We've done our resources. And what are we seeing from Matthew?
I'll pay 2 for a Sigil Miner.
Great.
To get a little bit more willpower on the table. And that is all I can do.
Okay, beautiful. So some extra willpower if we don't need it. Perhaps some extra resources. Let me see. I've got a Sigil Miner of my own. I've got plenty of spirit resources. I'm no longer the first player, so I can do this somewhat safely. I'll do a Steward of Gondor. Actually, well, you're the first player. But I still think I want to do this. I'm going to play Steward of Gondor on Dwalin. So you can gain a couple of resources. Worst case scenario, well, there are 2 more copies of Orc Raider in the 50 card encounter deck. So the odds of pulling that are pretty low, provided Dwalin isn't questing. Black Uruks aren't going to make him discard that. And then apart from that, I guess I'm out of leadership resources. Erebor Hammersmith I don't need quite yet, but it looks like we've got, well, I could use Gleowine though. Would you be so kind as to toss me a resource from Dwalin?
Since I have 0 tactics in my hand, I will send you one from Gimli.
Okay, only if you're sure, but thank you.
Yep.
Okay, Biffer gains a resource, and now I'll spend 2 from his pool to put Gleowine into play. Matthew's already drawn a lot of his stuff, so I think as soon as staging is done, I'll have Gleowine draw me a card. Matthew and I do have the insurance of being able to cancel a test. Well, okay, I guess the way that Sleeping Sentry works is it's deal damage to exhausted characters, and then you exhaust characters. So I'd rather have a living and damaged Gleowine than a dead Gleowine, although, we can just cancel that effect. So anyway, I'll just wait on using Gleowine, but that's all I'm going to do for the moment.
Okay.
All right, so questing.
I am sending 4.
Okay, and Arwen would make that 6.
Yep.
I could make it 5.
And then as far as her resource goes, would you like it?
I could use it. I don't really care too much.
Yeah.
I'll toss it to Biffer. Okay, so I'm doing 5. You make that a total of 11. There's not really... Like, the third quest phase has us draw some extra cards, but there's no huge need to take things slow today. And, Matthew and I are on a bit of a time crunch. So anyways, encounter card number 1 is gonna be a softball, wild bear, so 34, engagement cost, no threat. And you can basically stop reading. Ambush. After this enemy enters play, each player makes an engagement check against it. 34 is higher than Matthew's 28, higher than my 26. After it engages a player, which it doesn't, it makes an immediate attack, which it doesn't. So it's just going to sit there. Encounter card number 2 is Pathless Country. After at least 1 progress token is placed on it, remove a progress token from it. So that does contribute 3 threat, but it doesn't do anything. So we're up against 6. That means we're going to end up making 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Active location is gone. Actually, so what I'm going to do here is So each player may play a weapon or armor attachment from his hand prior to quest resolution. Let me see. Okay, Matthew's deck was actually made without any weapons or armor because of the attachment discard. So what I should have done if he did have Citadel plates or something is I should have had Gleowine draw him cards and then resolve everything. But we don't have anything that we could draw, so let's just get rid of that. I don't have any weapons or armor. So the location is gone. That'll bring us to travel. I'll have Gleowine draw myself a card. Let's say prior to quest resolution, I got a Northern Tracker, which is fantastic. And that means I might be able to get rid of this Plundered Armory on my turn. Pathless Country, by the way, is fantastic against Northern Tracker because it strips off progress tokens as soon as it gets any. Anyway, for travel, which of these do we want to go to? We've got the Armory, we've got the Pathless Country. On my turn, I could use most of my resources, and I could do... Okay, so if Biffer gets a resource, and he gets a resource from you, he could do Song of Travel, and then I could do Northern Tracker, and a Snowborn Scout, and I could remove Plundered Armory from play. So do we want to maybe travel to Pathless Country?
Sure.
Okay. So I will travel to Pathless Country. For engagement, there's no reason to deal with the wild bear, so shall we just leave it alone?
He will take a damage from Thalon, but
right.
I say leave him there.
Yeah, so good catch. Thalon, I missed. Wild bear, no reason to harass it. If need be, maybe we can Gandalf it later.
Let the sleeping bear lie.
Yeah, exactly. He doesn't look asleep in the art, but who knows?
Sleeping sentry bear.
Right. Refresh, I guess?
Sure.
Okay, so refresh. Arwen comes back to me. I'm once again the first player. Let's draw a card. I got a redundant copy of Steward of Gondor, which is too bad. As I'm now the first player, I'll do one resource from Dane for a Snowborn Scout as a defender. I'll put a progress token on that location in the staging area. I'll do one resource from Biffer for Song of Travel on Biffer. And then I will do 1, 2, 3, 4 for Northern Tracker. And that's it for me.
All right. I could play our wizard friend. I could play Galadrim's Greeting. I have a handful of events.
Yeah.
So good events to be sure, but really nothing helping our table.
Right. This encounter deck does have that each player discards, or the first player discards 3 resources from every hero. But you don't really have a lot of great options one way or the other.
No. This is not particularly exciting, but let's just reduce our threat by 3.
Well, before you do that, why don't I have Gleowine draw you 1 card?
Okay. It's not particularly great, but I'll play it.
Sure.
It doesn't, and then I'll still do Galadrim's Greeting.
So each of us by 2 or one of us by 6?
Each of us by 2, I suppose.
Well, I guess since we're both running Galadrims, do you just want to do one of us by 6 and then
sure. I'll do myself first just because I'm closer.
Great. Perfect. And then the other one of us will repay the favor.
Yep. Yeah.
Cool. So underwhelming turn, but I guess that's that.
Yep.
Questing?
Yep.
Okay. So I'm going to send 5, 6, 7, 8... including a Northern Tracker, which tosses a progress onto the Plundered Armory, which is immediately explored. No weapons or armor to put into play, which is a shame. Northern Tracker doing its job wonderfully. And you're sending a total of 4.
And don't forget Arwen's resource.
Yeah. So viewers, Matthew could use Sigil Miner to collect resources, but it's not as if he's, in dire need of those.
Right.
And there's no real reason for us to quest too slowly.
Right.
For Arwen's resource, It doesn't really look like you need it. I guess
Nope.
I could always use it on Biffer, so I'll take that. I suppose before the end of the round, we might want to have Dwalin toss me another resource, but let's wait until all the possibilities for canceling is done. Okay, encounter card number 1 is going to be a copy of Orc Raiders.
Oh my.
So I'm the first player. After it engages, that player discards 2 attachments if able. So it is going to engage with me, and I discard 1. Just worth noting is this says 2 attachments. I only have 1 attachment, but according to our FAQ, the developers have indeed clarified that you try to fulfill what the encounter deck is asking you to the utmost. So because I have 1 and not 2, I can't just say, well, technically. So Song of Travel is gone. Rest in peace.
He does take a damage, though, for trying to swipe your song.
Yes, it's like Thallin is invisible, which is funny.
A ninja dwarf.
Yeah, it's not as if I put these decks together or anything. Okay, so that enemy has a point of damage. It's not contributing threat against us. Encounter card number 2 is going to be a copy of Goblin Archer, which does take a point of damage and does immediately die. We're up against no threat.
That is amazing.
And so 2, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 is going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 to destroy Pathless Country. And I lost track of my math, but I think that's another 6 on our active quest card here. Progress tokens are placed 1 at a time, if my memory serves. So it's not as if our Pathless Country, takes 5 and then you remove 1 or whatever. It is an explorable location. So let's get rid of Pathless Country. And now we're halfway through our quest. For travel, nothing here. Let's see. Damn shame that we don't have like a Sentinel Defender or something like that.
Yeah.
But I guess actually Frodo and Dane are going to be enough to kill the Raiders.
Okay.
Cool. Okay, combat. Shadow card on the Orc Raiders. For defending, I'll do Snowborn Scout.
We hardly knew you.
Let's see what I pull. Great. So it's not a shadow card that returns it to the staging area, which would be frustrating because you've got a copy of Steward of Gondor. Although, of course, optional engagement, if you can, is great for getting around this forced effect. Snowborn Scout, like you said, Dead Meat, Dane, Frodo, team up together, just like in the books, managed to kill the Orc Raiders there. So I guess that's that. No Dwalin with a bow or anything to reduce your threat.
No.
Refresh. Your first player. Here's Arwen. And let's do our resources. I've got a copy of Untroubled by Darkness.
Oh, we meant to toss you a resource, so take a tactics one.
Yes. Thank you very much. So no reason not to do that. Matthew's already hitting that point where he's got a surplus of resources. Thank you for reminding me. If you can't tell, I'm trying to speed things along here.
You are welcome.
Okay. So, Sigil Miner, your favorite card.
Yep. Again, it's interesting how I was really worried about not having enough spirit resources, even though most of a good chunk of my deck is actually spirit, which is why we put Steward of Gondor on Dwalin. I'm just not drawing tactics stuff. I again could play Gandalf. I would draw cards with him if I could, but I don't know that it's necessary. I kind of want to keep him in our back pocket.
Yeah.
So for like a big quest push, or if there's a big enemy that we have to deal with. So I don't think our wizard friend is necessary. So I'll just get a little bit more questing power on the table and call it a day.
Sure, and just for the purposes of your Sigil Miner, I went ahead and took the liberty here of pulling up the average cost of cards in your deck. 19 of the 50 cost 1, 19 of the 50 cost 2, and there's next to no others that cost anything else. So if you do feel in want of resources, which
I don't do those trickery things.
Yeah, and I mean,
it's just going to quest.
Looking at your characters, it's not as if you're exactly hurting.
Exactly.
No Song of Battle in your deck, but you're fine.
Got nothing to play it on anyway. Yeah. Exactly.
Before you pass your turn, though, let's have Gleowine draw you 1 additional card.
Okay. Well,
Ah,
it's not bad. I'll play it.
yeah.
That could be helpful. And do you want me to give you a resource this turn?
Uh,
Let's go ahead and do it. I'm going to take it off Thalen. I don't need it. So
yeah.
it is all you.
Okay, great. Thank you. So
Hmm.
Biffer's now got 4. I'll go ahead and do 1, 2 from Biffer for Erebor Hammersmith. And wouldn't you know it, I've got a Song of Travel in my discard pile. I
Nice.
don't... Do I want to play this now? There's not really a great reason to. Well, I could quest for an additional 2, or I could try to get some resources. Let me take a look at what the costs are of my deck. Card cost is primarily 1 and 2. Let me see. I'm not in dire need of resources, but I could do that. I'll do... I wouldn't really mind. Okay, so I'll just do 1 from Dane, 1 from Biffer, 1 from Frodo to do Song of Travel on Biffer in this order, page down. And I suppose instead of 1 from Frodo, I meant 2 from... Okay, never mind. Okay, anyway, Song of Travel on Biffer, and then 2 resources, Spirit, for Sigil Minor, because it would be cool if we push to Quest Phase 2. Okay, so I'm done.
Okay.
And that's that.
I will send 8 if you want to exhaust R1 for me there. And then as far as her resource goes, have at it.
Sure. I'll throw that to Frodo, I think. No, because I'm not at risk of losing attachments. I will get rid of... I'll throw it to Biffer, I mean,
Okay.
for next turn's planning. For me, I will send quite a bit to the quest, knowing that I've got... Say Frodo could do an undefended attack if absolutely necessary. Let's do 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 for me. And you're doing 8, huh? That
Yep.
seems like an unnecessarily high number from me. So I'll leave back a Hammersmith, but I will send all my others. So I'm doing 10, you're doing 8. We've sent 18. It would be cool if we make 10 progress. Let's see what we get.
Cool.
Encounter card number 1 is going to be a copy of Sleeping Sentry.
Dang.
Yeah, I guess game over. So when are you going to be ready for recording another video, Matthew?
Good thing
Yeah.
we have a few test of wills
Right.
in hand.
So
What a nasty card.
this is canceled, but if we had not been able to cancel it, Frodo would have taken a damage, my miner would have died, my record keeper would have died, all these characters would have been exhausted, Arwen would have taken a damage,
Yep.
Matthew would have lost 2 Sigil miners. So incredibly nasty card.
Yeah. How many are there in the encounter deck? 1 or 2?
There are only 2,
Okay.
but then there's another treachery that returns all orc enemies to play, which I've had just be catastrophic. Encounter card number 2 is going to be each player must deal X damage to one ally he controls, where X is the number of allies. So in the early game, this, it's totally possible that in some nightmare universe, Sleeping Sentry could have killed... Well, could have set up Arwen to be killed by this Undisturbed Bones because she counts as an ally. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 allies. I guess I'm going to get rid of... Oh, what do I want to get rid of? I think...
I'm going to nuke my veteran Axan just because questing power is probably a bit more important.
Yeah. I'm tempted to get rid of my Northern Tracker just because it's not a dwarf. In fact, I think I'm going to do that. I'll kill my Northern Tracker. I could get rid of Gleowine, but card draw is so critically important given how many resources you and I have. And I've got Untroubled by Darkness in hand, so I want to be able to quest as much as possible to finish strong. So, odd choice, but rest in peace, Northern Tracker. I guess that's it. So, treachery cards. It looks like we've got a grand total of 7.
Now, what's your rationale for getting rid of Northern Tracker as opposed to, say, Erebor Record Keeper?
So,
is it just because he quests a little bit more?
yeah, it quests a little bit more. It doesn't have the dwarf synergy with Untroubled by Darkness, and most of the locations in this encounter deck have enough progress tokens that at the pace that we're finishing the scenario, I don't think that the tracker is going to be able to remove anything naturally. It's easier for us to just draw locations, make them active, tear through them.
Sure.
But that's my only rationale there.
Cool.
Northern Tracker is not a great include, but if we would have gotten multiple copies in play at once, then it would have been reasonable. And beggars can't be choosers when it comes to our limited card pool.
That's right.
But anyways, so I've got a modified 9. Matthew's got 8. That's going to be 17. So we're going to be sitting here at 27 out of 20. So we've cleared our first quest card. Quest card 2. Heavy rain drives you to seek shelter among the caves of the mountains. They are dry, and the fire you start seeps into your bones and restores your spirit. Your eyes are heavy when the soft clatter of falling pebbles reaches your ears. Perhaps you are not alone. So something interesting about this game is the fact that before Saga expansions came out, where you replay through The Hobbit, through the Lord of the Rings novels, these scenarios are pretty heavily inspired from what happens in the books. Like when the hobbits, the company of 14 all take refuge in the Misty Mountains, wouldn't you know it, a crack opens up at the back of the room, and there's goblins. So, when revealed, search the encounter deck and discard pile. It's in the discard pile for Goblin Gate. Add it to the staging area if able. Then, if there's no active location, Goblin Gate becomes the active location. What's funny is this does not instruct us to shuffle the encounter deck or discard pile. I don't think they ever put this in the FAQ, but if I wanted to, I could probably look at the...
Oh, I was going to say that I thought that it was, that basically anytime you go searching, you have to shuffle.
I know that was like the popular thing.
But I could be just misremembering. But are there more than one copy? Meaning, can we take one from the encounter deck?
There is just one copy. I've got the FAQ up. Doing a search for the term gate. I'm not seeing...
What about shuffle?
But there might be something that says shuffle. Point of the matter is, I don't think Matthew and I need the handicap of looking at the top entire encounter deck, so we'll let this one slide. Let me go ahead and take a look at our discard pile in search of Goblin Gate. Wouldn't you know, it's shining like the sun. There it is. So Goblin Gate, 5 threat, it becomes the active location. So this, while it's active, the first enemy revealed from the encounter deck gains ambush. If that enemy engages a player, just like a wild bear, it makes an immediate attack with a shadow card. That was something the FAQ clarified, that whenever an enemy makes an attack, not just in the combat phase, it does get a shadow card. And then those shadow cards are discarded. They don't hang around until, for perpetuity. Okay, so that was a lot said, once again, about nothing for engagement. May as well leave the wild bear there.
Yep.
Okay.
And all right, so refresh.
Yeah, sure. I'm first player, and then resources draw our cards, do our resources. I've got Unexpected Courage. You've got something good, too. It's only going to be a total of 11 progress to clear our location and push to the final quest phase, which will force us to pull some encounter cards, but I'm feeling okay. I guess I'm first player. I'll have Gleowine draw myself a card, which is Cancellation. I was hoping for a copy of Gandalf, since I've got Sneak Attack. Not the case, but I will do 2 resources for an attachment, because I'm the first player and you're safe, on, I suppose, Gimli. If we quest really hard and then pull some additional enemies, that'll be a nice way for you to maybe deal with those.
Right.
But that's all I'm doing. How about you?
I'm going to outright pay for Beaufort.
Okay, that certainly works.
Because I'd rather he stick around, and I've got the resources. Do you want to steal a resource?
Sure, I guess from...
Again, I've got no tactics cards, so it doesn't matter.
Yeah, okay.
So,
well, thank you.
Thalin, there it goes.
Okay, and committing characters to the quest, I suppose let's try and push. So, again, I've got Frodo for emergencies, so I'm going to send a lot. Arwen, do you need resources anywhere in particular?
Nah.
Okay, then I'll just throw it to Biffer, I suppose. So I'm doing 2, 4, 7, 9, 11, 13. And if I need to, I could do Untroubled by Darkness, but we might as well save that for the last round.
Okay, and I've got 12.
Okay, wow. I'm not used to those numbers from you.
Oh,
what can't you do, Matthew? Gosh, maybe when I'm older, I can aspire to model myself after you. So, encounter card number 1 is going to be a copy of Goblin Spearmen. Oh, if only we had a Gondorian Spearman in play. That's right there. Encounter card number 2.
Well, he's got ambush because he is the first enemy revealed.
Oh, that's right. Thank you.
So we've got to do our Goblin Gate.
Thank you for
So it engages a player, which is likely you, but I can defend for you with my Sentinel.
Yes, exactly. So it does have to engage with me. You're right. There's no optional engagement outside of the engagement phase. Good catch. So, if that enemy engages a player, it makes an immediate attack.
Right. And so his shadow would have been the Taskmaster.
Yes.
Master, technically.
Right. Right.
So that sort of spoils it, but because the Spearman was going to make short work of him anyway, it doesn't particularly matter, and now we'll have a new card that we don't know what it is.
Right. So, excellent catches all around, Matthew. Thank you very much. My tiredness muddled...
And did we do Arwen's resource?
brain.
Speaking of catches, I don't recall.
I believe that I did.
Okay. I don't think we really need it. So, anyhow.
So...
We miss it, we miss it.
Yeah. My apologies, viewers. Thank you for bearing with us on this one. Point of the matter is there is no way that Matthew and I would not have done this Gondorian Spearman blocking. So the Gondorian Spearman is declared defender. The Goblin Spearman immediately takes a point of damage. It's immediately destroyed prior to successfully resolving its attack. And then its shadow card would have been that Goblin Taskmaster. Doesn't have a shadow effect, and the shadow effect wouldn't have been resolved. The shadow card that I originally dealt in error to the whatever it was would be our second encounter card, which is a copy of Orc Raiders, and rotate left there. I was a little worried I wouldn't have remembered how to reorient an encounter card, and we'd have played with the sideways card. So this is Orc Raiders. It ambushes. After this enemy enters play, each player, starting with me, makes an engagement check. I make an engagement check.
Bye-bye Song of Travel.
Right.
Again.
Yeah, so...
But
20.
He does take some damage, at least. Again,
right.
Thalin likes to swipe when people steal songs.
Right. But 21 is well under my threat of 29. It engages with me. It does not make an immediate attack, but I have to discard Song of Travel yet again. Biffer's trying to keep his spirits up, but man, the encounter deck keeps on wearing him down. I guess, I don't know. Stealing a song seems very odd. Goblins singing throws me back to...
He just must like stealing music books or something.
I guess, yeah.
All right.
But anyway, we've got a total of 20...
another empty staging area.
Yeah, 25 threat committed to the quest. That's going to be 21 after our location. So 21 is greater than 7. Once again, Matthew and I could have been conservative and used these Sigil Miners, but neither he nor myself are in dire need of resources. I guess Goblin Gate is going to be successfully explored and discarded. Quest Phase 2B is successfully finished. Let's move on to Quest Phase 3. Orcs and other creatures have hounded you since fighting your way free of the orc outpost. Soon you will reach the safety of Rivendell's borders, but supplies have dwindled and you are dead weary from sleepless nights of keeping watch as dark forms shadow your camp. So, last hurrah here, when revealed. Reveal one card from the encounter deck per player, add it to the staging area. Characters cannot be healed. If we get 13 progress, we win. So, here we go, revealing encounter cards. Encounter card number 1 is going to be a copy of Goblin Spearmen. Because Thalon is committed to the quest and he stays that way until the very end of the quest phase, it takes a point of damage. Encounter card number 2 is going to be a Goblin Taskmaster, which, oh man, all these enemies are going to be engaging with me. Anyway, so Goblin Taskmaster is ambush. After it enters play, each player makes an engagement check against it. After it engages a player, that player deals 2 damage to a character he controls. So this is going to ambush engage with me, since I'm the first player. 2 damage to a character I control. I'm going to do those... actually, no. I'm going to do those 2 points of damage to... if I can get my hotkeys right, to my Erebor Hammersmith. It doesn't die, and it's safer than a hero. So that's that. Travel. We don't have any place to go to. For engagement... If you wouldn't mind taking this Goblin Spearman, I'd quite appreciate it.
I suppose I can do that.
All right. Thank you very much. And really, I guess all I've got to do is just survive versus, like, worst case scenario is I lose a hero, and that doesn't really matter too much. And I've got Frodo anyway. So, for combat, starting with the highest engagement cost, for the first player, shadow cards go like that. Dane is going to be fine to defend. I will have Dane deal with this swing of 3. Shadow card is return attacking enemy to the staging area after it attacks, which is annoying, but it's not a big deal. So that's fine. Dane will take 1 point of damage. The raiders are now in the staging area. They only contribute 1 threat, not that big of a deal. Shadow card at the end of the phase will be discarded. My other attack is the Goblin Taskmaster. I will do this undefended. Shadow card is, if undefended, deal 2 additional shadow cards to the enemy.
I will cancel that, just because.
Okay. Yeah, no reason not to, really. We've got plenty of cancellation. So, thank you for canceling that. I'll do 2 points of damage to Frodo, which I will take as threat. Bear in mind, Matthew and I don't care about score. I just as easily could have put it on Biffer. And, well, I guess 2 threat, 2 damage on heroes ends up being the same score-wise. So, doesn't matter. That happened. I don't have anything to do in response to the Taskmaster, so I guess that's that.
Okay. All right, and Gimli will attack or defend for me.
Okay. So Gimli is going to defend an attack.
Well, hold up. I guess actually Gimli would be able to get that 1 point of damage in, whereas Dwalin cannot.
Yeah, because he is wounded. You're correct.
So let's have Dwalin defend.
Great. So Dwalin takes a swing of 2. 2 minus 2 is 0 damage to him.
Yep.
And then Gimli does not receive Dane's buff, but he's got that point of damage. So he kills the Spearman. That shadow card is gone. Into the combat phase, I pick what order these are discarded in. I don't think it matters at this point, but I will choose the order that puts the location on top of the encounter deck. And I guess that's it. Refresh.
Yep.
Okay, you're first player, and here's Arwen, and let's finish this scenario. So, Snowborn Scout, let's all do our resources. I guess in the end, you didn't draw anything too terribly useful.
No. So I'm going to play Gandalf.
Enough! I am Gandalf, and Gandalf means me!
Okay. And, what do you want to do?
Let me just nuke the enemy in the staging area, I suppose,
Yeah.
to get rid of some threat. At this point, we're probably going to win this turn, so I don't need any cards.
Yeah, that's what I'd have done. Even if you would have drawn cards, it's not like you maybe you could have drawn like a 2 willpower ally, and that would have been slightly more willpower.
Yeah. And
Maybe
then I'm going to
you'd
use my last 2, or not last 2, but 2 more resources to put Unexpected Courage on Dwalin.
Sure. And I suppose there was also a chance you could have drawn Untroubled by Darkness, but considering I've already got a copy, I think...
Yeah.
Nah. Speaking of which, since I've already got one of my 2 copies, and you have yet to see a copy, what did you just use before you play Unexpected Courage,
Yeah.
I'm going to have Gleowine draw you 1 card.
Gandalf.
Okay, great. So now you can play Unexpected Courage because you don't need resources for a possible draw of Untroubled by Darkness.
Right.
Great. So you've done that. For me, I don't really have anything worth playing. I guess I'll spend 1 leadership resource to toss out a Snowborn Scout that is maybe going to be an emergency blocker if something crazy happens, but, spoiler alert, I'm sure nothing will. And that's that. Let's see. There's no way that we can draw 2 copies of Sleeping Sentry. If we draw, I think it's called Orc Ambush is the card. I've got cancellation for that. So I'm going to go ahead and send a bunch of characters to the quest. Let's see here. I'm doing 2, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11...
And if you want to exhaust Arwen for me, I'm sending 20. And then, what the heck? I'll have Dwalin take the resource.
Great. Okay, so you're sending 20. I'm sending 11. Our goal is 13. We're up against 0 threat. Something tells me we might just do this.
I agree.
But encounter card number 1 is going to be a copy of Goblin Archer, which, gets up from behind some rocks, and Thalon immediately cleaves it from head to toe, so it's dead. Just general deck building advice is I try to build decks to totally counter as many encounter cards as possible. Thalon is beautiful because Goblin Archer's in the deck, and then of course Gondorian Spearmen is beautiful against the Goblin Spearmen. Encounter card number 2, yes, okay, good. I was going to show this card during our post-game chat. So first off, Surge, it replaces itself, but when revealed, all orc enemies in the staging area engage the first player. That would have whiffed. If there are no orc enemies in the staging area, return all orc enemies in the encounter discard pile to the staging area if able.
Dang.
So just to look, that would have been a Goblin Archer, Orc Raiders, Black Uruks, Goblin Spearmen, Goblin Taskmaster, Goblin Spearmen, Orc Raiders, Goblin Archer, Orc Raiders, and another Goblin Spearman.
That's insane.
Pretty strong card. Matthew canceled the treachery earlier, so I'll go ahead and do that now. So here's my test of will. That effect is canceled, but it will surge to a copy of Pathless Country.
Okay.
I guess the worst possible thing would have been if we'd have drawn another copy, canceled that, and it would have surged to a Sleeping Sentry. But those are pretty low odds. Pathless Country, we've seen before, it does nothing. 3 threat against us.
Dang.
Actually, hey, Matthew, do you want to have been the one to cancel that encounter card effect? I forgot that I don't have Bifura's spirit resources.
But you have 2 sitting on Frodo.
I just re-added one after making my request. So I had 1 after Test of Will, and I just re-added 1 because I'm doing a takesy-backsy.
I'm confused. I don't see how Frodo can't afford it, but sure.
Right. So Frodo had 2. I used Test of Will to drop to 1, and then I'm taking that back to bounce back to 2. So thank you very much for doing your Test of Will. Thank you, viewers, for bearing with it.
But why does it matter?
It doesn't. I just want to end with a flourish. So here's Untroubled by Darkness. Yeah. Okay. So it totally doesn't matter at all. This is just, I'm compensating for something, I guess you could say.
Oh, jeez.
So each dwarf gets +1 willpower, so that's just going to add 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 to our total. So that is going to be a total of 40. Minus 3 is going to be 37. So even without an underground or dark location active, we still have 37 out of 13 progress. Matthew, we've finished well before you have to go to work. Even though characters cannot be healed, we've managed to win the game. So, Matthew, thoughts on this incredibly challenging scenario, Road to Rivendell?
I like the ambush mechanic a lot. I wish it was something they use more. They really haven't. I mean, there's other enemies in future quests that kind of ambush, but they don't technically have the ambush keyword. I think it's something that should definitely be used again, because I think it's fun and interesting. And while it tends to make questing a bit easier, because their threat comes out of the staging area, I think it can totally wreck well-laid plans in a way that's kind of fun and thematic. So I really do like the keyword. The quest, though, other than that, is fairly straightforward. The Goblin Gate is kind of cool, but it typically, as long as you're questing well, only goes off for one round. And if it hits an enemy that would have ambushed anyway, then I'm not so sure that it matters. Although I suppose it does make it do an immediate attack, which is a little bit different. So, again, these were simpler times. Quests weren't quite as involved. So I like what they were trying to do here. It's definitely different than most of our core set or Shadows of Mirkwood's quests, Shadow of Mirkwood quests, but it's sort of a dud, and even with period decks here, the dwarves definitely showing their power, and we haven't even gotten the Saga expansions yet to include those cards to make dwarves even better. So, if we had played non-dwarves, it might have been a bit trickier, but hey, they released Dane for a reason, and he pretty much helps these puny guys quest quite successfully. But anyway, what did you think?
Well, like I mentioned before, I didn't use Eladan and Elro here because I knew that there wouldn't be so much combat. Basically, what I wanted to avoid is, I don't want to quest with Elro here because I want to hold him back to defend. I don't want to quest with Eladan because I want to hold him back to attack. And then we don't get enemies, and then they don't do anything. Like, I wanted to keep up this forward momentum that the dwarves do allow. This is a pattern that we see in these adventure packs where each new adventure pack adds like a keyword where, what's the flavor of the month? This week it's ambush or whatever. And it is a cool concept, but the problem is that half of the time this kind of makes the game easier for us. Like, let's say this Goblin Taskmaster, Matthew's the first player. During the combat phase, maybe he was going to engage with it anyways, so when it engages with him during the quest phase, it's just like any other enemy, except it doesn't contribute threat strength against us. Its ability is when it engages a player, not when it ambush engages a player. This wild bear, even though it's a cool idea, when it engages it makes a bonus attack, the problem is its engagement cost is so high and it has no threat whatsoever. It just sits there in the staging area for the entire game. So this is a cool concept, but the execution is a little flawed. I've played this scenario more times than most scenarios. Not that I ever play this game too much, but like you said, Goblin Gate, I've never had it like, oh man, this 4 quest token location, I just can't explore it. It's like it shows up. Sure. Generally, like maybe you don't even pull an enemy, it doesn't do anything, and then it's just gone. So, cool idea, kind of weak execution, but, the Dwarrowdelf at least has nostalgia working for it.
Sure. I mean, certainly if the encounter deck was able to, throw some punches that couldn't be countered. If we didn't have our Test of Wills to cancel Sleeping Sentry, that's a totally different game. If we didn't have the cancellation for Orc Ambush, it's a totally different game. And if that's the case, then it'd be hard to clear this 4-point location if we were down to just our heroes or mostly our heroes. Certainly, I think, like many of the early quests, this one deserves its Nightmare treatment. I don't remember if I played the Nightmare one, but, 50 years in the future when we catch up to Nightmare, I look forward to revisiting a lot of these older ones because I know the Nightmare. I played all the Nightmare Shadow of Mirkwood, and it makes all of those so much better. So I'm sure, the nightmare, the ambush is cooler. Wouldn't surprise me if the enemies still count their threat even when they ambush, all those kinds of things. And it'll be, I think, a lot more exciting.
Yeah. Last thing I'll say is this was kind of a bummer for many players because in a lot of ways it was kind of a luck of the draw focused scenario where, let's say first turn Sleeping Sentry, game over. If you cancel Sleeping Sentry, great. Like if Matthew and I would have been right at the bitter end and we wouldn't have been able to resolve that orc ambush. I'm not going to go through the encounter deck and count, but let's say, maybe Matthew and I sent 30 willpower to the quest. We easily could have returned 30 threat strength of enemies to the staging area. We could have broke even. And then we'd have been overrun by enemies. So it just seems like it isn't exactly whether you win or lose is totally luck, but this just has like a random FU element that can occasionally come up, and that's just kind of a bummer because it really feels like players, if they don't play Spirit, are just prone to some really upsetting losses. But like I said, kind of a flawed scenario, but it's fun to go back through these. As always, I thank everybody for the slow or glacial release pace of this series, but it's always a delight to revisit these scenarios. Matthew, thank you so much for your time in recording another video. So I've pretty much said all I have to say. Unless you've got anything else, let's hear your plug and get on out of here.
Well, I would love it if you would join my co-hosts and I, Dan, Derek, Ian, for an in-depth look at the Lord of the Rings LCG, where we focus on strategy, deck building, and the metagame. We are the Grey Company Podcast.
Certainly give them a listen. They're always fantastic to, I guess, pop into my ears. I don't really have anything clever to say about the fact that it's a podcast that I enjoy listening to. So listen to The Grey Company. If you'd like to get in touch with me, I'm the Hive Tyrant on Twitter, on Facebook, on all your social medias. Feel free to reach out. Let us know in the comments section what your own play experiences are with Road to Rivendell. What unique spin would you put on the ambush mechanic to make it a little bit more interesting? But with that said, if you'd like to make a small monetary contribution to the ongoing progression series, I've got a Patreon as well. But thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. Take care. Best of luck. And see you again soon for the player card review of Watcher in the Water.